call to order. Good morning, colleagues. The first matter is the minutes of the previous meeting. Any issues arising from anything about the minutes of concern? Seeing nothing. Any business arising from the previous meeting? Seeing none, we'll go on to number 3, the 2017-2018 audited financial statements. The presenters we have this morning, Dan Paquette, the Chief Financial Officer, Jose Fernandez, Deputy Chief Financial Officer, Charlie Tivierge-Lortie, Audit Senior Manager, KPMG, Andrew Newman, Audit Partner, KPMG. Bon matin, Monsieur.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. It gives me pleasure. I'm pleased to be here today to present you with the audit findings report of the House of Commons for the year ended March 31st, 2018.
Reports we bring to the board to help members of the board in their oversight role for the House of Commons financial activities. During this cycle, we do cover the various financial results from prior years, the in-year activities, and for some of the future planning activities that we need resources for. So as part of this financial cycle, you will recall that last June I provided you with the year-end financial report for the fiscal year ending 17-18, and the purpose of that report at that time was to present the comparatives between the spending authorities of 2017-18 with those of the 16-17. Today, as highlighted on the slide, I'm here to present to you the 17-18 audited financial statements, and they are one of the many formal records that the House of Commons financial activities and financial position as of March 31st, 2018. They are prepared by the House Administration and present only one of the financial disclosure that we do for the public relating to our House resources. Some of the other disclosures that we do about our financial resources are the Report to Canadian, which we'll be discussing later at this meeting, the Public Accounts of Canada, our quarterly financial reports, the members' expenditure reports, and the House officer expenditure reports. The audited financial statements are prepared using the accrual basis of accounting rather than the expenditure basis of accounting. That means that they do reflect the activities of transactions and events in the period in which they occur rather than the period in which we've used the appropriations. Some of the main differences to note is that the net cost of operations in these financial statements include the services provided without charge, such as the operating costs for the various buildings that we occupy. And then we do have a statement of financial position, which includes our inventory, the capital asset less our amortization, the liabilities for employee benefits and sick leave, and as well as liabilities for vacation pay and compensatory leave. These House of Commons financial statements were prepared in accordance with the Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards.
As you'll hear in the next presentation, each year the financial results are audited by an independent external auditor. This year, as indicated by those accompanying me, the firm chosen is KPMG.
We have received an unqualified opinion. And to me, this is a testament of the efforts made by my team to ensure that systems and practices are in place to ensure that reliable financial information is available for decision-making in all of our financial reports.
Take a few moments to present some of the highlights of the statement. So the current picture shows you the assets and liabilities of the House of Commons. At March 31st, 2018, we have amounts of $79 million, which were principally made up of funds to the House of Commons to support operations. And these are sums that had to be spent by parliamentary organizations as well as departments, and if in any transaction of over $10,000.
The House of Commons liabilities were of the amount of $80 million, and they are mainly comprised of amounts payable to suppliers and employee benefits. As shown in slide 5 of the presentation, our cost of operations for 17-18 has increased by approximately $60 million. Our net cost of operations fluctuates from year to year, depending on various factors, such as the various initiatives presented in the House Administration Strategic Plan. To mention a few that we have reported previously, the investments we have done are into our HR, the renewal of our HR financial systems, our food service modernization, the digital strategy for modernizing the delivery of parliamentary information, and our LTVP. En comparaison avec l'exercice 2016-2018,
Comparison with 2016-2017, we had major differences with our operational costs between 17 and 18 as when it comes to salaries and benefits, transportation costs and telecommunications, our advertising and printing costs, and our repairs and maintenance costs, on top of a variation with respect to our own revenues. Pour la catégorie des salaires et des avantages, nous avons vu une augmentation de 61 millions de dollars qui peut s'expliquer par un ajustement tel que
of Parliament. There is also the economic increases for the House Administration employees and the annual increases for members' session allowances and additional salaries. There was also some increases in our capacity to deliver on the various initiatives that had been presented in the strategic plan for 16 to 19. For the category of transportation and telecommunication, we have seen a decrease of $2 million as a result of the one-time investment in 16-17 for the internet-based connectivity to deliver the constituency communication network for members. There's the category of advertising and printing, where we've had an increase of $2.1 million, mainly due to the promotions of the 150th anniversary of Confederation by the members, and there was also the increase in the House administrative printing cost as a result of the productions of House of Commons Procedural and Practice Book. The repairs and maintenance costs were also increased by $3.7 million due to the security enhancements to the West Block and the activities related to our long-term vision and plan. Les revenus ont augmenté de 10 millions de dollars.
Revenues went up by $10 million because of services provided to federal government departments, agencies, and other parliamentary institutions, as well as catering, cafeteria, and restaurant revenues.
The total budget for the House of Commons, adjusted to conform to the basis of accounting for these financial statements, was $598 million. To this, when we reduce the House of Commons expenses and add our revenues, that provides us with a surplus of last year that was $22.7 million, which was also indicated when I presented our year-end financial report for 17-18 last June. Finally, I want to inform you that we will be posting these financial statements to the House of Commons public website after this meeting. So I will now give the representatives from KPMG the opportunity to present their audit results of these financial statements, and we'll be open for questions that you may have on after the auditor's presentation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Andrew Newman. I am your independent engagement audit partner for the audit of the financial statements of the House of Commons. I am a partner in our audit practice here in Ottawa, and indeed I lead our public sector practice in Ottawa. I am also vice chair of the Public Sector Accounting Board of Canada, which issues accounting standards used by governments across Canada, and as well am a fellow of the Institute of the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. I am here to present the independent auditor's report, which is on pages 4 and 5 of the financial statements. And I do want to underline that it is an independent auditor's report. We are independent of the House of Commons and serve in that role as your external auditors. The auditor's report is addressed to the clerk of the House of Commons, which is entirely appropriate. And as your CFO mentioned, they will be publicized on the website later today. The creation or development of financial statements is a partnership between management and your external auditor, and we each have unique responsibilities. It is management's responsibility for the preparation and fair presentation of these financial statements in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, and for such internal controls management determines necessary to enable the preparation of these financial statements. That is why your CFO presented the financial statements today. Our responsibility as independent auditors is to express an opinion on these financial statements based on our audit. This audit is performed in accordance with Canadian generally accepted auditing standards, which are issued by the Canadian Auditing Standards Board and are used for financial statement audits of every entity in this country. Those standards require that we comply with all professional and ethical requirements and plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. In our auditor's report, in the last paragraph, you will see our independent auditor's opinion, and indeed it is the clean, unmodified audit opinion that you should expect from your management team, and it states that these financial statements do present fairly in all material respects the operations and the financial position of the House for the year ended March 31st, 2018. A little bit about the audit process. We start with an audit plan that we work and file with your CFO and clerk. We then perform our audit, and we do issue an audit findings report, which I believe was provided to the members of this committee, which really states how the audit went. I am very pleased to report that our audit went in accordance with that plan. We were on time and on budget, and we issued our auditor's report on June 29th as expected. I'm also pleased to report that during our audit, we did not find any material weaknesses in internal controls at the House of Commons in your administrative centre. That is excellent news for this committee. In addition, I must inform this committee, through an agreement between the House and the Office of the Auditor General, we perform the testing on behalf of the Auditor General relating to payroll with regards to their audit of the pay of the federal government with regards to the Phoenix system. In their sample, there were 8 employees they selected, and we performed the testing on their behalf and informed them confidentially of the results of our testing. For our own purposes, to support our financial statement audit, we increased that sample to 20 employees of the House of Commons. Again, very pleased to report that all 20 that we sampled for the year ended March 31st, 2018, all were paid the appropriate amount. However, during the year, 3 of those employees had issues with regards to the pay, and they were resolved by the end of the year, by March 31st, 2018. That is a result of work, quite frankly, by your pay and HR administrators within the House, working with the Phoenix Pay Center to get those corrected. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I conclude my report.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments, colleagues? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Paquette et Madame Thivierge, Mr. Newman, Mr. Fernandez, and Ms. Thivierge-Lortie. I understand that it is normal and good governance practice for independent auditors to have a discussion in camera with board members without management present regarding the preparation of the year-end audited financial statements. I'd therefore like to propose to board members that we hold a short in-camera session without the House Administration's officials to allow board members to have this discussion. Do I have acceptance of members to proceed in camera? Agreed. We'll go in camera. We'll pause for a few minutes to go in camera. The meeting is called back to order, and we're in public again. Maintenant, on procède au numéro.
We are now going to move on to item number 4, Report to Canadians 2018. So I would like to ask Charles Rebelle, the Clerk of the House of Commons, to make the presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am pleased to present the Report to Canadians 2018 to the Board of Internal Economy. The report provides an overview of the work of members during fiscal year 2017-2018, as well as of the House of Commons administration. More specifically, it focuses on our performance and achievements and includes relevant financial information drawn from the public accounts. In short, it is our annual report. Comme certains d'entre vous l'ont rappelé lorsque nous sommes réunis l'année dernière, le rapport aux Canadiens est un rapport très important qui nous permet de raconter notre histoire aux Canadiens. Notre rapport de 2018 rassemble beaucoup d'informations dans ces 48 pages. Dans la section survol des activités des membres, par exemple, les Canadiens pourront lire des données sur la composition du Parlement et sur la nature du travail des députés. Il y a de l'information statistique sur la Chambre des communes, par exemple le nombre de journées de séance, les projets de loi du gouvernement et des députés, le volume des documents déposés et le travail des comités. This section also describes members' extra-parliamentary activities through their participation in international associations. In addition, the report presents a snapshot of the House administration. The work done behind the scenes to prepare food and drink, to drive buses, provide legal, financial, and human resources services, to ensure that the Chamber and committees function as they should, and to ensure that procedures and parliamentary traditions be respected.
Decisions as clerk was to restructure the House administration to better coordinate our efforts and provide more seamless and enhanced services to members. I believe that this new arrangement has, in part, facilitated some of the administration's accomplishments this past year, including preparations for the move from Centre Block to West Block. It's been a pretty big year. Parmi les faits saillants, nous avons célébré le 150e anniversaire du Canada.
Among the highlights, we celebrated Canada's sesquicentennial in parliamentary style by commemorating the first meeting of the first Parliament. We also introduced a host of legacy projects, such as the decorative window that will be a permanent reminder of this significant milestone to be enjoyed by generations to come.
The board opened its meetings to the public for the first time. Our page program turned 40, and we published the 3rd edition of the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, the most comprehensive source of procedural information for members, their staff, and others who, like me, have a passion for procedures and practices that form our parliamentary system. The House administration was also honored when it was recognized as a top employer in the National Capital Region and at the national level for young people for the 2nd consecutive year. Je crois que ce survol vous a peint un bon portrait de la plus récente édition de Rapport aux Canadiens. Si vous approuvez la publication de ce rapport, il sera déposé à la Chambre et affiché dans noscommunes.ca. Le président encouragera aussi les députés à promouvoir le rapport auprès de leurs électeurs. My team will work to ensure that it reaches Canadians by sharing the report with our parliamentary partners and counterparts in provincial and territorial legislatures, distributing electronic copies to the media, leveraging our traditional and social media channels to promote it, and amplifying the message about the work that happens on the Hill by teaming up with the Library of Parliament to engage the public. We know we have a good story to tell. If you have any comments or questions, I would be happy to respond.
Mr. Holland.
Thank you very much. It's an excellent overview, and I think the document is fantastic. It does do justice to this place and telling our story. Can you give me a sense, because I'm not aware of its circulation, its distribution? I presume, obviously, it's available electronically, and there will be hard copies that are present as well. Do we have a sense of how many Canadians see this, how widely viewed it is, and just to expand upon what channels it's available?
Yes, well, as you wouldn't be surprised to know, it actually attracts more attention the moment it's released, and then there's a declining slope. From the reports we've had, because this is an online document, we've had 2,290 hits to see the English document and almost 600 to see it on the French side. So we're looking at a total about, 3,400 over the course of the last...
Not quite 36 million, but...
Right. I wasn't expecting 36 million.
Your Facebook, don't you?
Yeah. Jeff will work harder to ensure more people see it. Mr. Speaker, the only follow-up question is, so I would imagine other parliaments produce similar documents.
I'm not sure that everyone does, but I'm sure some do.
I'm curious to see those as well. It's something I can do offline. But thank you very much. It's an excellent report.
Anyone else? Madame Chager.
I would just build off of perhaps some innovative ways of how do we get it to more classes across the country, because we really do want to see more people be connected to this place. It does belong to Canadians, so I do think now that we are online, it is an attractive document that perhaps we'd be able to find ways to share it perhaps more broadly. Social media definitely is one way. Another thing that I would perhaps recommend for future editions is perhaps having some personal stories where people can actually share it. I had a family this week come to visit me. It was a grandparent who was bringing her grandson for his birthday trip, and they wanted to have a moment together. And it was kind of neat to see the interactions and being able to have some conversation. So I just figure, how do we make it more relatable so that more people see themselves in this place, thereby wanting to perhaps expose themselves to such a document?
One thing that I think we should do to help in promoting the document is make greater use of the Forum for Young Canadians and also the Teachers Institute. The Teachers Institute, I think, is expected to meet sometime before we rise for the winter adjournment. This is an annual event where something up to 80 teachers come from across the country. They are energized by the exercise of being treated here on a red carpet for a week. They come here to learn about Parliament, to make them better teachers, more informed, and I think you're quite right. If we wanted to use this document and other documents which are easily absorbable, it would be one way to pass the message on.
I should point out, as members probably know, that we have materials specifically designed for use by teachers in classrooms, and those are available to teachers across the country. Whether they use them or not, of course, is up to them. And so some might feel this is something they want to use, but certainly the process where we have the Teachers Institute and teachers coming here helps that, because over the years we've had quite a few teachers, and as they spread out across the country, they, of course, one would think, talk to their colleagues about what they learned here and share it, and hopefully there is more adoption of and use of these kinds of documents. Mr. Leblanc.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, et félicitations, Monsieur Robert. Moi, je suis d'accord avec mes collègues.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. I agree with my colleagues. This is an excellent and very well-designed document. It's easy to understand, and it describes our work in a clear manner. Thank you. I'd just like to encourage a little bit, as the speaker just said, the Forum for Young Canadians, Teachers Institute, those are great ways to share this document in its current form or perhaps in a modified form. Our comms people can maybe think about that. One tool that's very much appreciated in the schools in my riding is what we send schools to encourage young people to apply for the PAGES program. I see that the speaker agrees. In our schools in our riding, that's the time of year where I think a lot of us try to encourage school principals to encourage the most promising pupils to apply. In terms of what we send to secondary schools, perhaps we could try to attract schools' attention to this report. And maybe it could be included in 12th grade classes, whether it be in civics, political, or legal classes, such as we have in New Brunswick. That's exactly the right forum for this type of thing. And I think that there's classes on civics throughout the country. And I think this would be an excellent way to encourage youth to apply to the PAGES program. We know that it's been a great success. Anyway, that's just a suggestion. Thank you very much, Mr. LeBlanc.
Okay, Mr. Holland.
Mr. Speaker, I think I understand the reason why it's not present, because it would be very difficult to quantify. But I'm just wondering, through you to the clerk, there's no, when we're talking about members' activities, there's no discussion about the activities that would occur in the riding, or the activities, sort of the extension of the House into all parts of Canada. And obviously the roots of this place extend far beyond the activities that occur in this building. And I recognize it would be very difficult to quantify that, because you would have to have members report on activities in the riding, which would be extremely onerous. But was that omission considered, and is it for that reason that it's not present?
I can't answer with certainty about whether or not what reasons it's not covered, but I suspect that you're right, that it is in fact difficult to quantify. What we could do, if you like, is perhaps present a report about the variety of activities that members undertake during when they're in their riding, meeting their electors, their fellow citizens. That I think we could probably add. It goes to a bit to the point that Madam Chager raised, where you have a sort of a human interest element in the report that speaks to the nature of the work that you do on behalf of your constituents when you are in your constituency.
I wonder, what would you think of the idea of having, for instance, indicating the number of offices members have across the country, the total number, right? Because of course it's going to be more than 338 because of the nature of some enormous ridings. The number of full-time equivalents who work in those, something like, does that sort of stuff seem like the kind of thing that fits into this, or are you looking for what the kind of thing the clerks talked about in terms of this is what members do in their constituency offices? Well,
Mr. Speaker, I think both. I mean, part of what occurs to me when I was reading through the document is oftentimes people see Parliament as sort of a distant place that it's conducting its business at a great length to their individual lives. And of course, the truth is that the process of making legislation, the process of how this place works is intricately interwoven into every constituency across the country. And I think capturing that so that people can understand how they individually interact with this place and how members are, I won't say should, but often the different ways in which they do engage constituents and how they're linked into this process, I think is an important part of the story of this place, and it may help remove some of that sense of distance. And I recognize that there's not huge masses that at this time are reading this, but that could be pretty foundational as people are reading this and their understanding of this place and how this place works. And in my view, that's a component that's presently missing.
Thank you very much. Okay. Do you want to respond, or we go to Mr. Sproul?
Okay, Mr.
Sproul.
Yeah, I appreciate the interventions here so far. I think we do need to perhaps have an awareness, as the Speaker alluded to earlier, of the products that are currently available through the Library of Parliament that perhaps are more designed to speak to some of the things that have been raised. The report is designed to be more user-friendly, to be more attractive to look at, to be easy to digest, but before we get too prescriptive as this body, I would think we would want to know what other, how Canadians govern themselves, the package that members get from the library, which includes a PowerPoint that we can take to schools to talk about both our work in Ottawa and in our constituencies. I think that work has largely been done, whether every member is aware of it or whether I just wouldn't. If that work has been done and it's available, we could perhaps get a full understanding of every tool that's available. I don't think you're going to get all of those tools into the report to Canadians, the annual report. It is an annual report after all, when we'd like to make them as exciting as possible, but there are other tools available, and perhaps at a future meeting we could have the librarian to talk about that.
Well, undoubtedly, you find all the other annual reports you read for various organizations to be very fascinating, I'm sure. Anyone else? Madame Chager.
I think where I'm coming from is that the annual report changes every year based on what's occurred. Like you've been able to highlight that the boy is now an open body and so forth. A lot of the documents in which the speaker was referring to are documents that stay the same over a longer period of time. So I'm just saying that people can actually relate themselves to this document by being able to perhaps highlight some other things, therefore making it more relatable as to what took place on the Hill that year versus what won't change. Yes, the way government works and Parliament works is very similar, but the annual report, you're able to highlight different things, and most people don't come here every year, and I think that's where we could have a connection.
Thank you. I just want to highlight, for the benefit of anyone watching who's not familiar with the terminology used around here, that when we say boy, we're referring to the Board of Internal Economy. Anything on that?
I think we're good.
Anyone else on this? Thank you very much. In that case, we'll go on to number 5, the Joint Interparliamentary Council, Parliamentary Associations, Activities and Expenditures. The presenters are Bruce Stanton, MP, the Deputy Speaker, forgive me please, our superb Deputy Speaker, by the way, the co-chair of the Joint Interparliamentary Council, and Colette Labrac-Riel, Clerk Assistant and Director General, International Interparliamentary Affairs. Monsieur le Vice-Président. Oh, just a minute. Sorry, Madame Brosseau.
I'm sorry, we adopted the report, right? I thought.
Okay. Well, I should clarify that. Yes, thank you very much. Is it agreed to adopt the report to Canadians and that I should table it? Thank you very much. Agreed. I appreciate that. It's very helpful. And now, on to the next matter. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et tous les membres du bureau.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and all members of the Board of Internal Economy. This morning, or this afternoon rather, it gives me pleasure to present the report on Parliamentary Associations' activities and expenditures for fiscal year 2017 to 2018. As you know, this report has to do with the activities of 13 associations. This afternoon, I am joined by Madame Colette Labrac-Riel, who is the Clerk Assistant and Director General for the International and Interparliamentary Affairs.
Points of our report for last fiscal year. It is essentially divided into 3 sections. The first part around the structure and governance for the associations and JIC. Secondly, an overview of all of the association activities for that fiscal year. And finally, the bulk of the report, essentially a summary on each of the 13 associations' activities. On the next slide, essentially key highlights effectively. And you may recall this would be the first fiscal year that the interparliamentary associations had a higher budget. And so there was, we had this discussion some time ago about an increase in the overall spending envelope. And that resulted in certainly an increase in the number of travel activities to 50 different countries and 53 inbound delegations. We did see an uptick in the number of travel activities. On average went from, that is the number of participants for each trip, if I can call them that, from about 4 to 5, and back to somewhat of a historic average for most of these travel activities. In the actual budgetary envelope, the Parliamentary Association's total spending was around $4.5 million. As I mentioned, that's with that extra $1 million in total for all these activities. And of that, there were contributions or otherwise membership fees of just shy of 1.4 million, and the balance on activity expenditures of 2.75. You'll see, as is usual, there's always a certain amount of the activities that are unspent. So, and this happens due to planning and the time periods around which these activities are planned and agreed to. Each of the associations determines their own travel activities in that regard. But ultimately, we've seen over the years that they never really meet or require the full envelope, and this year is no exception, with roughly 91% of the budget being used and leaving 9% essentially on the table, an amount of about $425,000 underspent for this past year. And so that's it essentially in a snapshot of what occurred in the last fiscal year, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Strahl?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the overview, and I do recall being seized with the issue of funding earlier on this year. And I want to talk. We're talking about the activities and expenditures of parliamentary associations, and I think for a number of years, it's been my understanding that these are essentially nonpartisan associations where members with interest in particular countries or particular causes get together and represent Canada on the world stage, often host Canadians or host people in Canada as well, other delegations. And but we find ourselves in a situation now as a result of activities that occurred this very week. Your visit is timely, where we are in I would consider it a very grave situation relating to particularly the Canadian NATO Parliamentary Association and the activities that happened earlier this week.
The matter, the representatives of the Joint Interparliamentary Council are here today in relation to their report regarding activities and expenditures from April 1, 2017 to March 31, 2018. So last year, not events of this year, and of course in relation to general activities, not particular activities of a particular. But secondly, the matter you're raising is one on which I have rulings pending. So I'm not prepared to have to entertain this topic today.
Do you have any indication of when you would expect to deliver those rulings, Mr. Speaker?
In the fullness of time, in due course.
In the fullness of time.
But obviously, I'm anxious to do so as soon as possible. Ms. Bergen? Ms. Bergen?
Very respectfully, BOIE does not operate as we operate in the chamber. This is an open and a public meeting. If this place now becomes a place where we can't, if Bruce and Colette don't have answers, they can tell us that, and I think then we would accept that. But I think, Jeff, for you to now not allow us to, Mark, to ask about this, when we're literally, this is what we're seized with, this is the elephant in the room, and this is our job, I think it's going to make things even worse. So why don't we talk about it, and then let the folks who are at the head of the table here give their answer. But I think for you to shut it down right now is going to be very, very concerning on a lot of levels.
Mr. Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think your ruling is most appropriate. The reality is this is a matter before you that is being considered, that you are deliberating on, and obviously once your ruling has been given, then we can discuss the matter further. But I would say, secondly, that the BOIE is a body that operates on the basis of consensus, that operates on the basis of nonpartisanship. There are many different venues through which we can have conversations of matters that are being discussed here that I think are quite partisan in nature, and therefore I would submit that it's not the appropriate venue for this conversation.
Okay. Mr. Stanton, is there anything you wish to add on this comment?
I don't really want to render an opinion on the proceedings of this committee. I think certainly members will be cognizant of the points of order that were raised in the House yesterday, and that covered much of that ground. I think members are well aware that this has become a matter of some dispute, and that ultimately has been taken before the House to you, Mr. Speaker, for some kind of guidance or resolution.
And I look forward to providing a ruling in the near future. Sorry. Mr. Straw.
Would you permit me to ask Mr. Stanton if this is a matter that the Joint Interparliamentary Council, the dispute between who is the current chair of the NATO Interparliamentary Council, if that is a matter with which they are currently seized?
Straw. Mr. Stanton.
So we had a meeting of the Joint Interparliamentary Council yesterday. This meeting was in camera, so I can't speak in terms of some of the activities or shall I say the debate that took place, a brief debate on this matter without going into details, but I will say that there is another meeting scheduled, an urgent meeting scheduled for next week.
Thank you very much. I think that deals with this for the moment. And any other matters relating to the Joint Interparliamentary Council's report? Seeing none, we're going to go on to the next matter, which requires us to go back in camera. So the meeting will adjourn for a moment while we go in camera. Thank you very much.
Thank you.